afternoon. As people who watch regularly know, I'm Nat Wood. This is 30 frames a second. And people who don't watch regularly, if you caught the last words on that opening, it said 30 frames a second. It is my distinct honor today to bring to you Minister Al Taylor, who is running for State Assembly in the 71st District. That's Washington Heights, Inwood, and I think like the end of Harlem.
Yes.
You've had a long interaction with that community. Before we start on your campaign, how did you come to that area? Where'd you come from, brother?
I am, as I often tell folks, I'm a country boy.
Okay.
Born on a farm, but my family migrated to New York, to Harlem. My summers were spent there afterward on a farm, and I went to school in public school in New York City. So it was kind of interesting. My grandmother was a superintendent of one of the, a couple of buildings in Harlem. I know them off the top of my head, 135 Edgecombe Avenue, and then 163rd Street. So I've lived and worked in this community most of my life. When I wasn't on a farm for summer school, well, that was our summer school. My mother sent us there to make sure we were out of harm's way and on a farm. And my uncle presumed that he had free labor for the summer, and my sister and I, we worked in the tobacco field. We had to feed the animals. We had our chores before we could eat. So it immediately introduced
Where you from?
me.
North Carolina?
North Carolina.
Yeah,
You hit it.
Yeah. Well, you said tobacco field.
Listen,
Yeah.
it immediately opened us up to hard work. So we understood the value of work. My parents worked, so we learned the value of work. So working was never a problem for me. And living in Harlem most of my life, I've loved it. I still love it. And I'm trying to hold on to those things, those memories. You pass this block, you remember the radio, well, they didn't call it radio, it's the record shop. And they have their music outside, it's blaring. Fridays was a fish and chip place. And over here, you could go to the Apollo for like $5. And next to it, you had the arcade where you could play over there. When the Lowe's was there, it was called something else.
Yeah, Better Crust Bakery.
Bam, 140th. And then you had the movie, it was called The West End over on 125 between St. Nicholas and Amsterdam, I think.
They had the arcade or the Lowe's. They had the Rennie's on 7th Avenue, the Roosevelt on 145th. Bad,
Sweetback. I mean, I grew up in that era, going to school. So serving as the chief of staff for the Assemblyman, it was great. It has been fun. I graduated from the school, which is less than 200 feet from my office. Working, living, and now an opportunity to serve there is phenomenal. I've been with him for a long time.
Get us from, you've gotten us from North Carolina to Harlem, to growing up in Harlem. Get us through the process of growing up as a kid in Harlem, between Harlem childhood and chief of staff for probably one of the most historically significant assembly persons in history. That's Herman Denny Farrell. How did you go from there to that? Because that's an amazing, whether just that process is amazing.
Oh, wow. I can't say that without first saying this. I have to thank God for allowing me to experience this. Living in Harlem, going to public school, bullying is not a new sexy thing. It happened then. The gangs were there, and I fought to survive. I wasn't a great fighter. More times I learned how to run more than fight. And the times I did fight, I came home with my clothes destroyed. My mother was, I don't send you to school to fight. But I understood that. But those parents of those kids were not telling them the same thing my mother was telling me. So I come home with ripped pants or this, that. I don't send you to school to fight. I don't go to school to fight. But that's the nature of the beast. So fighting.
Yeah, my mother was more mad about the ripped pants than the fighting.
She was mad about the ripped clothes, without question. But she think I had an option in this. No, when you got 3 or 4 people standing in front of you, there was a block, and I'm going to say this block was 140th between 7th and 8th.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The post office sat in that block.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
my mother would come home from work. We had play clothes back then. You take off your school clothes, you put on your play clothes.
That was straight up from Douglas. Douglas
right up from
was,
Douglas, around the corner, Old Doug. So the thing was, you got the slip, go get the thing. Go get the package. So I had to get in the block one way, got in. Now I'm coming out of the post office, I got a box. Now I got to do, it's not a sexy word, I got to do the OJ. I got to get out of that block with that box and back over on Edgecombe with my package. Because my mother don't want to hear anything in the middle.
Edgecombe is a long way away. I just had to make it over a block. If I could get to the backyards between 142nd Street and 143rd Street, I was safe.
There
no
you
one
go.
would dare come after me.
Backyards were really great for maneuvering to get away from things. So I migrated through that. I made my way to high school. I graduated from IS-10, which was the old dub that they opened. I was the last all-male class to graduate from the school. I graduated, entered into the, it's called College Bound program. So all I had to do was hold my head, do the work, and I would get a free ride in college. Everything, the wheels fell off the train. And what happened was I learned that I had an encounter with one of those kids from the elementary school, and I'm not promoting violence at all. That's not what I want to say. But I finally met this guy face to face, and we fought in ninth grade. And man, did I put something on him. I had no practice. I don't know what I threw, how I threw it. His mouth was bleeding. His nose was a little red. And I don't know what happened, but I knew that this guy stood in front of my freedom, and I was afraid. And I fought like all, and after that, everybody was like, oh, this guy, he can fight. So what happens? I become one of the cool guys. Everybody want to hang out with the cool guy. I lose the opportunity to go to college for free. I find myself getting arrested, and I had the fortune, the good fortune, to go before a guy by the name of Judge Bruce Wright.
Speaking of the assembly, Keith's
his father,
tremendous, historically significant father, the great Judge Bruce Wright.
A phenomenal opportunity that I didn't even realize was before me at the time. So life was kind of zigzag for me. I told my mother I was too old to go back on the farm. My summers would be in New York, where I was starting to get in more trouble than the law would allow. And I found myself in 1976 without an education, without the prospects of getting a high school diploma for almost 3 years. And my friends were starting to graduate. I'm like, how are you guys graduating? They said, we was doing homework. I thought it was official hangout. So I joined the military because I thought that was the only way that if something happened to my mother's child, she could have a funeral that the government would pay. I didn't look at the benefits, but I got in the last couple of months before you could get in without a diploma. And I found myself in the military as a military police officer.
Wow. You are really like Destiny's Child. No
matter how I messed up, it fell back. So I get a GED in Germany. I'm a military police officer, a gun and a badge at 19. I'm like, are you kidding me? And driving a patrol car in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. When I got off the plane, they had tumbleweeds. Like literally, like if you're looking at a Western and a tumbleweed blows by, that's what's there. Now, I'm still taking you all on that journey from New York City to the assembly. I graduated, I got my GED. I come home, I joined college. I go to college right away, Lehman College. I met my beautiful wife. I gotta show you, she's fantastic, right?
Look at the paper at you thing because
I'm sorry.
You look good, and I want to keep you looking good.
Thank you. And my wife would appreciate you telling me to get that out of there.
That's good. At the
end of the day,
points with his wife.
I met this beautiful woman, Gwendolyn, and man, she's been by me ever since.
Excellent, brother.
Phenomenal. So I graduate, but prior to my graduation from college, I take an internship in New York City government. I'm a junior in college, and I take an internship in New York City government offered by CUNY. Who do I work for? 8 hours a week. I go to Assemblyman Farrell's office.
Wow.
So I'm there, I'm a junior, I'm about to become a senior, and then I hear about this internship in Albany that's worth 15 credits, and it's an internship. I said, I want that. And I said, would you have me as an intern in Albany? He said, sure. So I'm still here.
Wow.
And that's the story of how I got into the assembly. I was his assistant as a legislative assistant. And I got there so early, they started to give me a key because security had to open the office door. And all I was looking for was an opportunity to get a great recommendation. And as I sought that, I started to understand the different levels of what was keeping us oppressed, from legislation to banking. I participated in a study that showed the redlining of banking. So it was a story that went like this. If I went in dressed like this, and somebody else of other persuasion went in, I wouldn't get the bank to open an account for me, but they could. They told me you had to live or work within a 10-block rule radius. If you didn't, you couldn't open up an account. And I was like, really? Whether it was on the south side of, east side of New York City, whether it was the west side, or whether it was Hunts Point, every time the same. The study was commissioned by then Senator Franz Leichter, and he was doing the study to show how banks were discriminating against the residents of those communities, and they wouldn't open up unless you lived there. So the bank says, no, that's not what we're doing. So it makes sense why you see so many check cashing places, because there was a time when banks didn't want to do business in our communities. Now they're like, oh, come on in.
The number man was
the bank.
Right, was the bank.
He would help with the turkeys. He would help with this. And people respected what he did. I'm not saying, but now OTB does it.
No, OTB doesn't do what the number man did, because your grandmama can't go to OTB and get money to feed you or pay the rent. So the road you referred to, from North Carolina to Harlem to the military.
Yes.
All of these entail a lot of opportunities that no longer exist.
Yes.
There is no longer an equivalent to cut 'em loose Bruce.
Nope.
There is no longer the ability to go into the military without a high school diploma. A lot of our children, and I mean black and brown children, and I'm a Harlem alumnus, you know. So I'm speaking specifically to that experience. But a lot of our children have to succeed in spite of their circumstance, as opposed to because of their circumstance.
Yes.
You are now running, and hopefully by this time next Wednesday, you will officially be the state assembly person in the 71st district.
Yes.
That's the end of Harlem, that's Washington Heights, that's Inwood.
Yes.
A lot of black and brown people, a lot of Dominicans.
Yes.
So you also have the added responsibility of catering to a constituency that has a lot of immigrants of color.
Yes.
And you're doing so in a time where, from the top down, from the federal government down, there is a disdain, there seems to be a disdain, not just for homegrown people of color, but of immigrant people of color.
Yes.
And notice I say immigrant people of color as opposed to immigrants, because immigrants from England and France and you know, don't seem to have the same
issues, problems.
Well,
they're not on the radar.
Confrontations, you know, that immigrants of color have. Assuming that you will, by this time next Wednesday, in the next 8 days, be the assembly person for a community, and we saw the community, parts of the community in the opening. What is your mission? What do you envision your role to be as an assembly person?
To be the voice of that district, and as you already indicated, it's a diverse community, multiple ethnicities. How do you serve with distinction, listening to what they have to say, knowing some of the problems, education, housing, certainly transportation is an issue up there. When you look at the IRT line up there, we've had the elevator breakdown so many times. But there are a great number of people that you'll see them, they're your laborers, they're going to work. And then you have issues with DACA. So we are in a difficult season with respect to Washington has taken to lead to basically like take a sledgehammer and smash everything that makes sense. So how can I say this and be kind? My grandmother said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. But I feel compelled to say something here. I have to say something. And I think our president has looked at this from a perspective that maybe people have maybe thought about. But he sees from building a wall to telling people that we don't want you in our country. And I don't know. I tell folks, I'm not that smart. My wife said, don't say that. I said, really, there are a lot smarter people than I am. But the people that bombed us or blew up the trade, they're not on the list of can't come to this country.
Right.
So what are you doing?
Right.
And I think the courts are saying.
You mean people from Saudi Arabia?
Right. They're still welcome. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be welcome here.
Well, Saudi Arabia is an ally for corporate reasons. If you're talking about human rights violations, Saudi Arabia
leads the pack.
That is correct.
So
that is
my
correct.
point
so that's
to that is
obviously not the issue.
Why are this particular people group from this particular area not allowed to come in?
Right.
Right? And the ones that are here, why are you saying
and so vilified?
Right. And it's like there's a meanness that's being spoken. Let me digress for a second. In my walk in 2016 from the United Nations to the south side of Chicago, I walked the cornfield roads of Ohio and the northern parts of Pennsylvania by myself. I saw the Confederate flags. I saw them drive by in their cars. And you know what they did? On that narrow road, they would go way over and move to make sure they didn't hit me, and they waved at me. That was my experience. And the little ladies that said, oh, please have some water. When they found out that I was on a prayer walk from New York to Chicago, they didn't say, get out of my neighborhood.
Right.
It wasn't no neighborhood.
Right.
It was just trees and corn.
Right.
So I bring that up to say that what I was experiencing was different from what was being reported on national news.
Right.
And I think we owe each other, even this conversation that we're having right here, we have to be responsible of what we're churning up and throwing out there. And people need to also be cognizant to listen and watch for other things to hear, so you're not just getting one viewpoint, because it's easy to stir the pot and bring up the hatred and the bigotry of the things, but that's not who we are as a nation overall. There's more to us than that, and that's what I was experiencing at the same time. That major network was showing something else. I did not have that experience.
State Assembly person Denny Farrell was in the State Assembly, like 42 years?
42 years.
42 years. And he had a position commensurate with that kind of time in the Assembly. He was chair of Ways and Means, which meant that he had the responsibility of the finances of the whole of the Assembly itself.
Yes.
You'll be coming in, assuming that you get the gig, you'll be coming in as a novice.
Yes.
At some point, you're going to be offered a committee. I don't know how all of this will shake out, because they'll need somebody else to be Ways and Means, so I don't know what will or will not be open.
Yes.
But if you... And I won't even narrow it down to one, because we don't know what will or will not be open. But what are some of the committees that you think you could be effective in helping?
I would love to be on education. I would love to be on housing, and I want my hands on transportation. And if there's anything that's dealing with second chance opportunities, I want to be all over that. There is currently a new Ways and Means person that's been identified by the speaker about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
So that transition is happening right now, and we have for clarity and transparency, I've been, for the past 2 months, I've just been a candidate and not an employee because you can't do both. So education, transportation, and housing are the committees that I would love to be on first. It's funny that we're having this conversation because I received a call from the Speaker's office today, and they wanted to know what committees would I be interested in. Not that they're going to give them to me, but they just want to know what my pecking order would be. And I just want to also add that I am on the Democratic line, I'm on the Working Party's family line, and I have no opposition.
Excellent.
So there's nobody out there. I mean, unless they get 3 million write-ins, then of course I would.
So you're like, it's like betting on racing. No matter, even if you're the only horse, there's no guarantee that you won't break your leg before you hit there. I mean, so there's always something, but you are the odds-on favorite. Yes.
Yes. And happy and excited to be there.
You almost make my next point, my next question, moot. I was simply going to allude to the fact that some assembly persons, and as I said, Assemblyman Farrell was a senior member, head of the Ways and Means.
Yes.
He had a more stay-at-home type of way of handling his job than, say, even a Keith Wright or a Bill Perkins, who was in the state Senate.
Yes.
They were very, very bully pulpit. Even Keith Wright now, who's not serving as anything, was at the renaming of Alambe Brathway on 125th Street, sitting there with Mayor Dinkins and, that whole bunch. You kind of answered the question, but I'm going to ask it again for those who might have tuned in late or missed it. Do you envision yourself as being a bully pulpit, out front type of assembly person, or a stay-at-home more assembly person?
And
bully pulpit might be a little too harsh, but
so
I think you understand.
I understand. Yeah. It is so. I feel obliged to speak to Denny's position, former position.
Right.
Having been on his staff for such a long time, we did town meetings 2 to 3 times a year, whether it was an election year or not. And then when you stand at the subway station to tell people there's a town meeting, plus there's a mailing, if you're a registered voter in that district, you will receive it. And they say, well, you only show up as so-and-so. No, we're here. And the fact that he's able to stay there as long as he has is indicative to the staff that he's had. And there were a couple of people that ran against him. But I'm not sure exactly who I will be. I just want to be me in the sense that I'm the guy, like, I was on a subway station this morning, 148th in St. Nicholas, and I had to have spoken to close to 300 people easily because I had these stacked in 50s, and I had 400 with me, and they were gone.
Excellent.
And at the end of the day, well, what about so-and-so? There's drugs over here. I said, listen, I would love to help you. Will you help me help you? And will you work with me? Because I'm not the guy that's going to take on the whole world and you get to sit on your couch and do nothing. We all have to have, as Congressman Adriano would say, you have to have skin in the game. You can't just sit on the thing and say, we want you to do it. I will do everything possible. And as the pastor of a church, when people come to me, hey, pastor, we have a great idea. I said, well, are you ready to carry this water? Because I'm not going to do it alone. We can do it. So I want to be that person that leads and helps to develop leaders and people coming alongside, let's fix this. And in the districts, different people have different conversations, different needs. Let's go together and understand we are one people. And I think we all want transportation. We want better education. We want to sustain the housing that we have and keep it affordable going forward. So, yeah, I guess I'm that guy. That, if you're standing on my toe, I'm like, hey, please, could you get off my foot? And then I'll gut check you just a little bit in Jesus' name just to make sure, hey, get off my foot, man. Come on, you're standing on my foot. So, I have a big mouth, and I'm an advocate for folks, whether it's the prayer walks that we do at 6 in the morning. We started in the South Bronx 12 years ago. We started in the Polo Grounds 9 years ago. We started in Grant Housing after the young lady the basketball celebrity
Oh,
Chicken was killed.
yes,
So
yes,
we have a team of guys.
Yes,
and
that was horrible.
It was
horrible. That was
unthinkable,
horrible.
unconscionable.
Right.
And
right.
here's the
Right.
thing.
And then her brother ended up. The whole thing was horrible because
it was tragic.
Right.
It was tragic.
There
and
were some
that's
guys.
That's all that happened.
I don't want to get off of this.
No, absolutely.
And remind me to ask you about the duties of the assembly, the state assembly, because a lot of us lay people, we know public office, and we just assume that a person in any public office, their duty is to come out there and listen and just wave a magic wand and fix stuff.
Yeah.
But different offices have
Different responsibilities.
Different responsibilities. But before we get to that, because you mentioned the young basketball, the
Yes.
young lady who played basketball
Yes.
and was
She was a high school
murdered.
senior with a lot of promise.
Correct, a lot of promise. And you also mentioned before we started the show that you've worked with Aisha Sekou.
Oh yes, yes.
Give us some background into your working, because that is very activist. I like that better than bully pulpit,
Yeah,
and it's
that's
more
the word.
accurate.
Yes,
you know.
yes. Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's a great word. Aisha Sekou and I met close to 9 years ago, probably, and we met somewhere at midnight. No, that's not true. I think the first time I spoke in a room, she was in the room, and she said, "I want you to come to her show." And I was like, "Okay, I'll get there. I'll get there." And I didn't really know who she was at that moment, and the conversation was about. And what brought us to the Polo Grounds was there were 4 homicides in a 30-day period in 2008. And so I called a couple of my friends, said, we're going to do a prayer walk. So we're walking through. And what people are not realizing or fail to look deeper at, the issues that are happening in Grand or Manhattanville or Polo Ground are interconnected. These kids are in the same high schools in most instances, and they're there, they're fine, but there's beef and they have territorial issues, and some of it can be job related, it could be poor parenting, it could be parents are doing the best they can do, and kids will fall off. I was that kid. I had great parents, but I didn't do what they instructed me to do. And Aisha has always been one of those women, one of those people, in the vanguard saying, I'm doing this, and could you come help me do this? Like, she sent me guys, she said, I want you to do this, what I got. And the idea is, I guess if I could say it in any kind of way, we're retooling and working our resources. Because when you're on the ground, people say, well, you are a minister of the gospel. You are an Israelite. You are a Muslim. Nobody cares about that when there's a body on the ground and there's a problem. It's like all hands on deck. We are working. And so for the most part, many people didn't even know that I worked for the Assemblyman because they didn't see that role. They saw me on the streets. And blessings to Al Sharpton. They did the Take Back the Street Corners. But we were already in the trenches prior to Take Back the Street Corner, and we're still there. There are a group of guys that were meeting these complexes, whether it's, oh my goodness, is Edgemere and Far Rockaway, Bronx River Housing. You have Manhattanville, Grant, Polo Ground, St. Nick. And now there's a group on the south side of Chicago that does it, but they do it on Friday evening. And the idea is, I don't want credit. I want men to stop complaining and get up and stand in their community, and they get much respect. And when you're in a circle with men and you're having a conversation, it's different from what you would have on a Sunday, because you get guys that are huge, and man, they're crying and telling their story, but they're comfortable and safe in that room, and they're having that conversation. So I've seen Sister Aisha Sekou, and we've joined together. I mean, whether we're doing bump and dancing on St. Nicholas, or whether we're on the corner, hey, I need a microphone, you got a speaker? And so you're grabbing the resources because there are not enough resources out there. And it's great and sexy to have these programs, but if you don't have some real, where the rubber meets the road, our kids are going to jail. And they're coming in.
To cook a fish, you got to hook a fish.
Yeah.
And Like they say, real recognizes real.
Real recognizes real.
So the fact that you have a cutie pie program or whatever is not going to attract people who are not easily fooled. Real recognizes real, so you have to be out there.
You give me a certificate, you tell me I've completed this. The people that are running the program, 6 figures or more, I have a document, but I can't get a job with that document.
Right.
And that's got to change.
Right.
Or you will put someone, incarcerate them for $120,000 a year.
Right.
But you won't give them $20,000 to run an after-school program.
Right.
We have to figure out how to do what we do smarter.
And more and more, the criminal justice system, the prison, for lack of a better word, prison is becoming the primary employer and primary housing provider for black people and people of color.
Exactly. And then they're going to send you way up north.
Right.
In a community that your folks can't even get to.
Right. And it economically benefits the people. Its existence economically benefits the people way up north.
So
not
it compounds.
Even right.
It compounds the problem.
Correct. Correct.
I want to figure out how we can do what we do better. I want to be that voice to see how it's possible. And so, for the record, there are a lot of people that don't look like us that love on our communities in ways that are just hard to measure. Whether I have some friends of mine from up in the Heights, they come down, you guys are doing a Christmas thing? Well, listen, here is some money to buy toys.
Right.
You know, because people come to expect things. I know it's not always about toys and people have their own, but for the kids that makes a difference. For the kids that, like someone I was talking to, I said, today is Halloween. She said, what do you gotta do? I gotta pick up candy. You gonna give out candy at your church? If the kids knock on my door and they want candy, I'm gonna give them a Bible.
Right.
Yeah, really? I wanna meet them where they're at. You wanna have some candy? Here it is. At my campaign headquarters, same thing. And people say, well, give them a fruit. You can't give them that because if somebody, there's so many reasons why that's not a smooth thing to do. But there are people,
ain't the old days.
Yeah, there are people that are weighing in and say, I will support you.
Right.
I am a bridge builder, and bringing people to the table is one of the greatest strengths that I have. And I learned this early, like, I don't have the resources. So I said, I tell you what, people say, well, what do you want? I said, can you buy me a turkey, right? And yeah, I want to make a donation. Give me 4 turkeys.
Right.
And so the family that doesn't have a turkey, okay, pick one up. And I'm learning how to maneuver this thing. And it's been what we've done on the ground for the longest. I got to go back to my sister Aisha, say, cool. I am proud of Street Corner Resources and what they're doing. And we laugh a lot. I said, remember, you didn't even have a light? Like a light bulb. Like, not even a mic. And now she's got a place. But she's real, and where she's at, she's impacting the violence that's happening in the community. And that's what I want. I want to stay connected to my community.
Right.
I give everybody my cell number. They say, are you going to change your number? No. If you got a problem with me, and before you blow me up, just ask me and let's have a conversation.
Right.
And I'm that guy.
Right.
That's what I want to be. And on that question of, you had a question, you were coming back to the question in terms of
the responsibilities, of the state assembly, because, like I said, people like myself on the outside.
What does that look like?
We see different groups of politicians clustered together, and we kind of think they all do the same thing. but a state assembly person is not a state senate person, and a state senate person is not a council person.
Yes.
And they all have different
roles.
Right, different roles.
Yes, city, state, and federal. We're the lower house, if you would. The assembly, our job is, as I understand it, is developing legislation, but not just legislation, but hearing really the aspects of your community, representing your community. I want to say this, and hopefully I'm not dodging it, but representing that community, I think there are over 100,000 people that I would represent,
right.
And hear from them, represent them well, and do legislation as well. There is something...
and I think there's like 150 assembly districts.
There are 150, and that goes across the state of New York from one end to the other end. And this is what I tell young people, tell anybody for the most part. From the time you're born to the time you die, your life is legislated. People are making decisions about your life, and you're not doing anything about it. And people say, well, you understand, nothing's going to change. And I talk to different people in various communities, and I say, you know what? I just want you to vote. And I don't care, and I mean it. If you don't vote for me, I don't care. Go write your name in. I need people to know that you're voting, and then that changes the playing field because there's a voice that's coming out of there.
Right. And not doing anything is doing something.
Hey,
and
can you say number 45?
Yes. And more often than not, it's the most effective thing you can do to empower someone else is to not do anything.
Don't do anything.
Opportunity. We bridged on opportunity. Before the show began, we were talking about the facilities at M&N. We were talking about discipline. You talked about your life and how different opportunities presented themselves.
Yes.
And we live in a time where more and more there are less and less opportunities.
Yes.
As a not just assuming that you'll get the job. But not just as a politician representing a district, but as a person representative of the people of that district, and that group of people clear across the country and clear across the world. One of the responsibilities that people like me assume, people like you understand, is that collectively, you have a responsibility to do the thinking and find ways to come up with some opportunities so that we can move from point A to point B. Am I wrong in that assumption, or how do you see your role, and what would you like your role to be on a holistic?
I want folks to weigh in. So, for example, I'm working with a group of, I call my Mimis, they're millennials. There are 10 of them, and they're at different stages of their life. One is a senior this year. 2 of the ladies graduated from Howard. One is just back in because she did some international studies. And one of the guys is preparing to take the LSAT. And what we've been talking about for the last 45 or so days, here and there, are things that are dear to them. I want to hear, and they don't use the King's English, you know. I said, I want you to forget about who I am and the different hats that I wear. I just want real conversation. So we sit down and we talk. So those type of conversations, letting people weigh in where it could help, I want to hear and listen. But also, I think when we're talking about higher education, so for example, partnerships, what would it look like if CUNY said, hey, you know what? We hear that there's a need for coding over there, and we have it in our higher education component, but maybe we'll bring some of those bright students over and spend a couple of hours a week. That could be their internship while they're teaching these different things, and or, hey, you know what? That's a beautiful camera over there. I would love to learn how to do that.
Right.
So let's make it happen. And with the phones that we have nowadays, you can do so much technology, so many different things from that phone. So bridging relationships, bringing a Columbia, bringing a Hunter and CUNY, and maybe Presbyterian Hospital. What are the things that we can do together to bridge, to bring services to these communities, and not just like, okay, that was good for 6 months. I want something that's going to be long-lasting and transformative. So, for example, after school, when I was a kid, we could go to PS 123, right on 140th and 8th Avenue. I think it was from 3 to 5. Then your parent knew, because you had a card that says you can hang out. Now you can't go into the schools anymore. They don't offer these different type of programs, but there is a program that you can go to. It's called Rikers.
Right, yes.
We'll educate you over there. And I think we have to do what we did best then. And I'm not the guy that thinks, oh, all the old stuff was better. But I'm saying we have to look at some of that
Well,
stuff.
at least the old stuff was there.
It was there. And there's nothing there right now. And we need a play. Well, these kids are standing on the corner.
Right.
Someone said to me, well, what are you going to do about that? I said, I'm a preacher, not a police.
Right.
So I'll offer opportunities for education. I will offer opportunities for something else, but I won't go and say to these guys, it's time to go to jail.
Right.
I think we have to exhaust everything. And now, everybody's not going to take advantage of everything. I get that. But make opportunities available.
But we seem to have this polar end of the scale where we had a lot more opportunities available at one time. I mean, you can go to church or you can go to jail. Fine. There was a time where you could go to the neighborhood boys club or the Y and join a basketball team, play pool.
Yes.
Do your homework after school.
Reality House was a place up on Sugar Hill.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I loved the place because the summer jobs were over.
Right, we had summer jobs.
Everybody had a job that wanted to work.
That's right. That was the thing.
If you wanted to work, you could get a job.
If I wasn't working, it meant I didn't want to work.
Right, exactly. Right. We need that back again. And I don't know that it's the city's job exclusively to do it or the state's job exclusively, but what about weighing in on some of these companies that are doing so well?
Correct.
We need some internships and a stipend that says, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do this.
Correct.
And you may have to start in the mailroom.
Correct.
There's nothing wrong with working in the mailroom. And I tell guys that like to think that there's a better way to make their money that's tax-free. I say go to McDonald's. It may not be sexy, but you can get food, you can get insurance.
There are a handful of people who just like, watch Empire or Power or something and envision that. But for the most part, young people who are in the street, who came up like me, I would say 90 to 99% of them would throw all of that in the garbage for a real job that paid them some money that they could do something, and I'm not talking about like,
no, we're not talking about crazy money. We just and you nailed it. My life changed the day I went and took that exam for the military.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, and they're calling all these people's names, and like 7 or 8 of us still left out of a room of like 30.
Right.
And the first thing I thought was, dag, I failed again.
Right.
And then the recruiter said to me, we said to them, the folks that are in this room are the ones that pass. Okay, now it's the next step.
Right.
And so I went and I sat with someone, and he said, well, you could be a auto mechanic, you could be a cook, electrician, or MP. Now you're smiling, and my hope was not there. So I was the kind of guy like, I don't believe this. Because as soon as they find out about that Bruce Wright incident, I'm not going to have any of this. So I'm sitting there like, I'm waiting for you to take this away from me.
Right.
And a week later, I was officially sworn in and I left. I was like, oh, shoot. And then so I'm in boot camp. And you have to think, it's going to be a thinking man's game. After boot camp, I was like, okay, all right. Now I've put in the sweat and tears. I'm going to advanced training so that I can be an MP. And man, I studied. I took the GED 4 times.
Right.
4 times. And the first 2 times, I hadn't given it any real consideration because I was hanging out with my friends in New York. But I took it twice in Germany and nailed it. And the idea is, when I got my driver's license, if we can get little milestones, okay, let's get a GED. If you're not going to go to school, let's help you get your driver's license. And these are small steps going forward that says, hey, man, I've accomplished something. Because a lot of this is self-esteem. My self-esteem was shot. It was shot. I mean, if you Google, I'm very transparent. As a child, molested. So for me, I'm like, it took me 50 years to put that on Front Street. And when I looked at my past and some of the crazy things, fighting, getting in this, is because I got to prove I'm a man.
Right.
And I found that I had been abused that had nothing to do with me at all.
Right.
But if you don't put it out there and know that you are still whole, that you are relevant, you matter, then you're going to live the lie. And I want to be that guy or that person that says, hey, you know what? You could do anything you put your mind to, and I want to help you however way I can.
We talked about 45 and the top-down mentality that seems to be more pro-alt-right and less that group of people, those people who truly make up the bulk of America.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that 45 is doing, Russia notwithstanding, that even Congress notwithstanding, there are a lot of things that 45 does in the dead of night with the stroke of a pen that will impact a whole lot of people.
Yes.
Even those things they talked about, they're talking about the tax package that they're talking about will negatively impact
the middle class,
a whole lot of working and struggling people
for years to come.
You'll be in the assembly. You're talking money for programs. The healthcare thing will be a burden because the first thing they want to do is eliminate. They've already eliminated a substantial number of navigators.
Yes.
In a city, in a state, in a country that was finding it difficult to sign up in the first place. They needed these people, and a lot of these people have been eliminated.
Yes.
They've eliminated reimbursing the insurance companies, which means that there's a lot of people who are not going to have any coverage, and they are taking money away from Medicaid, which means that there's a whole lot of people who have no coverage, no hope of getting coverage, and no outlet to get sick other than the emergency room where they bandage you up and ultimately they're going to throw you in the dumpster. This is the assignment that you now face.
Yes.
How do you see yourself working with this environment?
It's not sexy. I think when we look, and not to exclude HUD in there and the finances that are needed, and when I say HUD, I'm referring to NYCHA in particular and the repairs. I think there are 100,000. No, it's not 100,000. There may be 100 million, but there is a deficit in NYCHA right now that's been causing some problems. I'm not sure that I can honestly sit here and say, well, at the end of the day, this is what I'm going to do. We have to look and see what they're actually taking money away from and how this New York State filled that gap. It's going to be a tight run. It's going to be tight. And to that point, it's important that we get involved in the political process and understand who we're voting for or who we're not voting for when we sit at home and what we allow to happen. Because at the end of the day, those folks are going to make decisions about us. And if we're not at the table, they're making them. They're making them. And so it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a difficult one. One of the things I used to watch, not as closely as I would have liked to if I'd known I was going in here, is the budget. Every year, the budget is what Chair of Ways and Means had to look at that and understand what is the fiscal impact of this program on here, and what's the fiscal impact if we don't get this money. So, for example, if we're relying on the federal government for reimbursement, we're doing this, we're doing that, and they're covering a part of the lion's share, and they take that off the table, it sounds like drastic cuts around the table. I just don't know. I can't speak into it, but it's a difficult I think that's the most difficult thing I face right now. First, there's that unknown, and then what are we going to do about it when we do know exactly what they're taking off the table? Because as it stands right now, he's only been there, 9 months or so like that. And
certainly it was to our advantage having a chair of Ways and Means in the State Assembly from your district. Because with 150 assembly districts, and everyone looking for a share of that budget.
They want a piece.
They want a piece of that budget.
Yes.
And you have a lot of districts that have a lot more clout, that are more squeaky wheel, that can assert themselves to get their piece. And a community that is not engaged
At the table.
has far more difficulty getting the things that it needs to sustain itself.
I will fight for my district. I will fight for those that I represent to get as big a share as we can. And I don't use the excuse that I'm a junior going in. I'm like, listen, I work hard.
Yeah, no, this is the war.
Hey,
Here's your gun.
I want to be on my grind.
Yeah.
And when folks said to me, like, look, you can't go to Chicago. I'm like, why? They said, you've never done it before.
Right.
What's your training? I said, I'm training now. Well, who's your trainer? I don't have a trainer. What do you do? I walk. You heard the joke, how do you eat an elephant?
Right.
One bite at a time.
That's right.
So load up and go after what you want.
Right.
Be consistent and work. Knowing if you're listening to this and you're watching me, I'm going to fight for you, and you can call me on it if I don't.
Right.
We may not always agree, but we will never become disagreeable.
Right. We only got a couple of more minutes. DACA, because you have a large Dominican community, which is, the president didn't seem to have much respect for Puerto Rico. They never even mentioned the Virgin Islands. It's like the Virgin Islands.
They didn't have any impact at all.
Yeah, that doesn't exist.
It's fake news.
Yeah. But certainly the Dominican population is a legitimately immigrant population.
Yes.
And it's an immigrant population of color, which means that there will be unique issues related to that community that you will have to address in your role as state assembly person for that community.
Yes, and we also have Mexicans, we have folks from Ecuador. So there is a vast group of Latin-speaking people there, as well as so many other. But my position is we have to do everything that we can to push back against what Washington is doing. Here's something else, and I'm trying to, cultivate the soil so I can understand it better. But there's a church on 179th and Fort Washington, and they're housing a family because they want to deport them. So one of the things as a clergy, I want to understand that better, and what can we do to create safe havens for folks that are having that issue, so that they can't be thrown out while they're being advocated. Well, people are advocating for them. Where's that place that we can put them? So I hope to have some roundtable discussion with clergy folks that can do it. Because that's a safety net that keeps them from being taken out. Because they're going after folks in so many different ways. So you go to court for a traffic ticket, you walk out of court, and they're waiting to grab you up. It's just...
And they're threatening to withhold federal funds to any state that does not comply with this zero tolerance toward immigrants of color. And I say immigrants of color.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's basically who
I think you're correct.
About.
And when you look at this, here's something else that you want to think about. A child is getting ready to go to school. And the parent tells that child, if you come home and I'm not here, these are the things that you need to do. Right? So, for example, because I may have been taken, and these are the steps. Go to the neighbor, do this, do that. Those are the conversations that are being had, and others probably more drastic than that, because the fear is real.
Right. We got about a minute and a half.
Oh, wow.
Minister Al Taylor, make your pitch, look into that camera, and get people out to vote and tell them to vote for you.
Hey, listen, I would love your support. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. And, hey, I want to work for you. 71st Assembly District, November 7th, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. The polls will be open. And if you need to, my cell number is 646-418-8000. Text If you have some questions, I would love to have your support. I just don't want you to vote for me. I want you to hold me accountable, but I want you to roll up your sleeve and come help me do this job that needs to be done. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you so much. We got a minute. They're telling me to stretch. I want to thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
And to our viewers, again, he's very humble. He's very out there, as you saw for some of the pictures. This is Minister Al Taylor, and as he already said, I'm being redundant. But he's running for state assembly in the 71st district. He's being handed the mantle by the #1 assemblyman in New York State history.
But
Herman,
actually, I'm working for it. If they'll vote for me.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much
Thank you so much. I appreciate
sharing your time with my viewers and the audience of 30 Frames a Second.
Looking forward to
brother.
coming back.
I'm looking forward to having you, brother.
There it is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Peace. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, same nat time, same nat channel.